And we are live.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is January 25th, 2022. I'm Joe Benning, the chair of Institutions. I represent the citizens of the Caledonia District. Also on the screen with us, committee members Corey Parent from Franklin County, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator Mazza from Colchester Grand Isle, and Senator McCormick from Windsor. We are talking today about a series of reports that have been sent to us, trying to get caught up to speed on what everybody has been doing with respect to those reports on the various issues that are discussed therein. And I'm going to let everybody know that hasn't been here before, or for those who are watching on YouTube, what we try to do is keep the conversation at a pretty general level for people to understand. I do know that folks who are coming in to make reports are going to be talking in a language that may be familiar to members of the committee, may not be for those new members of the committee. But the upshot is we know we have a listening audience on YouTube, so I try to keep the conversation as much in the English language as possible. So if you should wander off into some vernacular that I know I may understand, you may understand, but I think that the audience may not, I might interrupt your testimony if you're a witness and just ask you to explain what X, Y, or Z is. I have first up on the list Commissioner Fitch from BGS. I do not see Commissioner Fitch on the line at the moment, unless Alex, you tell me that she's coming in from the waiting room.
She is walking past my door now. She's about 30 feet from her screen. So
I'll let her in when she arrives.
All right. It's good to have an update on where her actual physical presence is, Eric.
We could say some hellos from the other BGS folks who are in the room to fill time while she's connecting. We have some other special guests today that'll be in and out of all of this.
Okay. I'm assuming that we're going to be meeting with them momentarily. I don't see Lauren's name on the list. I do see Brian's name on the list. So Lauren, if you were not going to testify, you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Washburn. I am Program Chief in Design and Construction for BGS, and I oversee the Major Maintenance Program.
Great. Welcome to Senate Institutions. Commissioner Fitch has walked past Eric Philcorn's office and is now joining us on the screen, waiting to see if she can actually hear what we're saying yet.
She has that need to put my headphones in look on her face. Yeah, see, got quiet.
Does she have headphones to use?
She did.
Well equipped over there, but if off, she's on.
Maybe she's running back to your office.
So our other guests from BGS today are Brian Sewell, who runs our energy office. So when we're talking about the revolving loan funds, he's the man who actually understands how all that works. And then, of course, your loyal correspondent, Joe Aja, is in the room. And when the commissioner arrives, I may fade into the background so that I can spy on House corrections for a moment as well. So if I disappear, it's because I'm double dipping.
Interesting.
And I'm redundant because you have smarter people here.
I was waiting for some snappy comments from the rest of my committee members on that comment.
I know, I lined it up right there, but
We teed it right up and we just whiffed. We whiffed.
it's not worth the trouble anymore.
I think the commissioner has a sister who was on the Hawaiian detective program. Looks just like her. Watching the last night.
No, is that CSI Hawaii?
Yeah, that's right.
Now that you mention it,
I've been watching. My wife watched that all the time, and I swear it's her sister. I mean, it's just wow, close
Could very
resemblance.
well be.
Yeah, we got to ask her that.
So now Eric has moved to a different location. This is
Must
pretty
be
good.
she must not have sound.
Oh, she's ignoring us.
can get it right for you. You'd probably feel more comfortable just.
I can hear Eric for whatever that's worth.
Watch out, Eric, what you say.
So am I. I mean, especially the IBM ones. I was having this trouble. The microphone is.
Your microphone is on,
green,
Eric.
Speakers at 100%. Have you rebooted?
No. Do you want me to try to put in my earbuds and see if it magically works?
Yeah, plug in your earbuds just in case. Your default speaker has changed to headphones. Yeah. Okay. And then.
We can hear you.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can hear you.
All right.
There we go.
The earphones are working, but my computer is not. I apologize for that.
Take the message.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry, I was late and then my computer's not working.
So welcome back to Senate Institutions. It's kind of fun to watch you and Eric switching rooms. And for our YouTube listening audience, this is just one of the many quirks of doing things remotely, which all of us really don't like. In any event, Commissioner Senator Maz and I were just talking about a television show called CSI Hawaii, and the star seems to have a
That'd be your
faint
sister.
resemblance to you.
You sure that's not your sister or you?
Hey, you know what? I'll take it.
Have you seen the program?
Well, I haven't. Is it? Well, I know of the program. Is
Okay.
it somebody? Is it somebody that I would want to be like?
She's the star of the program. She's the lead person.
Okay.
Karen's a gun. Monday night, just in case you need to know on CBS,
Okay.
that's where you'll find it.
I will watch one.
I am looking for a report on property management revolving fund and unexpected bond balances for major maintenance for fiscal year 2021. And Commissioner, I have you first up on the list. You know the routine about introducing yourself, telling us how you fit into this picture, and then we'll run from there.
So my name is Jennifer Fitch. I have the honor of being the Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. Before that, I was the Deputy Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. And before that, I worked for the Vermont Agency of Transportation. So I have been a civil servant for the state of Vermont since 2004.
Welcome back to Senate Institutions. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was in committee last week when we talked about the administration's proposal to pay down some of the debt in the property management fund. So basically the debt in the property management fund is currently about $21 million. That amount has slowly been going down over time and is comprised of basically two buckets of debt. One bucket of debt is $11 million, and those are currently, and that's what's called our property management, treasurer buildings. So those buildings were basically a mortgage about 22 years ago. In the way that those buildings work, and there were three of them, it was Holton Street, I verified that, but we have since sold it. Also Asa Bloomer and 108 Cherry in Burlington, and Asa Bloomer in Rutland. And Holton Street was somewhere up north. St. Albans, thank you, Joe. And so that's one bucket of money. Basically, the state acquired those buildings at the 20th year, kind of like a standard mortgage for most houses, right? We go for 20 years. And then what we're doing is we're actually spreading out those payments over a 50-year period. So we're 22 or 23 years into that 50-year period, but I think 2047, we will have paid off all the debt for those buildings. And so there is a funding source to pay those off over time. And the way those payments are made is that those buildings are unto themselves. So that means that all the building tenants within those buildings pay for those buildings, and they're in their own little bucket, just that building. And so part of the fee for space payment, which is what we call it, includes that payment to pay down that 50 years of that debt per the building. So that's one bucket. It's got its own revenue source over time, and that will be paid off. And then we've got the $10 million I testified to last week that has been built up between 2004 and 2017. And that was really the operational debt that we accumulated from the property management program. We had no revenue source during that time period for that $10 million. And so it just sits there. And right now we don't have any way of paying off that debt. But that's why the administration is proposing this year through the Budget Adjustment Act to pay $10 million to basically take that debt off of the books. I think as most folks in this committee know, and here today, unfunded liability is not great for the state. It doesn't help us when we go to bond in terms of the amount we can bond for and the rating that we get. And so the more we can pay off our debt, the better our opportunity to go to bond and be bonded for a higher amount of money and at a lower interest rate. So it matters and it's important. So we were at a height in the property management deficit a couple of years ago where we were at 23 million. And again, we've been working it down, and that's again through the payments that we're making to those property management treasurer buildings. So that's kind of the broad brush on the property management deficit program. We are extremely dedicated. We don't want to accumulate any more debt. We do the best job we can to basically, in order to not accumulate any more debt in the program, we need to make sure that in the way that we fixed it starting in 2017 for operations to pay for the staff to basically have this property management program, which is all the leases. We have 120 leases through the state of Vermont, and that is for all branches of government as well as all agencies and departments. So we serve everybody at BGS, which is great and unique. But we need staff, right, to maintain all those leases, to work with the tenants in the building, to work with the landlords, to make amendments to leases, all of those different things that go along with leases, move people in, move people out, help with fit up, different things like that. So what we're doing now and what we started in 2017 is there's a surcharge. So when we go to bill an agency or department or branch of government for lease space, it not only includes the cost of the lease, but also a surcharge on top of that. That surcharge is being used to pay our staff. Now, what's important, right, is that over time, we get pay increases if it's bargained through the union and different things like that basically make that program more expensive over time, right? Costs increase over time. That's just natural. So one of the important things we have to do is we always have to make sure that we're reconciling that surcharge amount so that the amount we're bringing in for revenue to pay for this is equal to what it costs to run the program. And we have been doing our due diligence to make sure that every year when we request program funds, that we are being really diligent in managing all of those different accounts and making sure that we're not going further into deficit, because that's what's really important to us, is that we continue to kind of pay down that deficit. So we've been working really hard. We work with the financial services division as well as the finance and management department to, again, make sure that we're reconciling everything and that debt does not further accumulate.
Commissioner, on these lease payments, is there a cushion built in, if you will, to help defray the cost of major maintenance at any point, or is that a separate bucket altogether?
That's a separate bucket altogether. Major maintenance is for state-owned buildings, and for leased buildings, there are times, Mr. Chairman, where let's say they make a programmatic change to the way they want to run their operations, and that means all of a sudden maybe they need a security feature when you walk into the building, or maybe they need more meeting rooms, or something may change. And so we may need alterations to the building. But in lease space, the way that we do that is we don't use any capital bill funds. We do every once in a while. We did at National Life. That's a much longer story. But typically speaking, capital bill is for state-owned space. And so typically when we work with landlords, we work that into either it goes into the lease payment if they do some fit up for us, or we pay them directly for that fit up. So there's different ways in which we can pay, but generally speaking, right, it's the landlord's building. So they're the ones that after we agree to whatever those changes are, we'll go get a price. They'll come back to us here at BGS. We'll work with the customer and they'll either say yay or nay on the price. And then how are we going to pay for it? Is it all going to be paid for at once? Or are we going to pay that, over time through the lease payments?
Anybody on the committee have any questions?
I like this group, Mr. Chairman.
I have to take them aside and say, guys, you got to start asking questions.
Well, when you explain it properly, we don't have to ask questions. She does a good job explaining.
Thank you, Senator Mazza.
I don't know whether you had anything else you wanted to tell us this afternoon, but you're on a roll right now without any questions.
Do you want to move into major maintenance, Mr. Chairman, now that you've mentioned it?
I am happy to move in that direction. I just see that I was given an updated schedule for today, and I see that's been added to the conversation. So, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I will say about major maintenance, just to set the stage for either Joe and or Lauren, is that we use major maintenance. It is an annual appropriation typically through the capital bill. It's roughly 7 million. It varies slightly here and there, but that's roughly what we get. Major maintenance is used for deferred maintenance. And so that means items that in theory should have already been replaced or renovated. And so they're deferred because they haven't yet been addressed. And so Joe is the director of design and construction. He used to oversee major maintenance, and now it has moved on to Lauren Washburn, and it's her responsibility to both program major maintenance, to work with her staff to assign major maintenance projects, and assure that we are addressing in a priority order those items that should be addressed through those major maintenance funds. So it is a very important fund for BGS because, again, it's addressing all those deferred maintenance. It's probably one of the most important line items for us to continue to reliably operate and manage our buildings, right? Without having something critical fail and then having to shut down the building. Because, for instance, if I don't have any heat, can't have anybody in the building. If I don't have any water, can't have anybody in the building. So there are certain aspects, and obviously we focus on safety first. That's usually the highest priority order on the list. So with that, in the broad brush description, I don't know whose preference is to go first, Joe or Lauren.
I will defer to Lauren and back her up if need be.
So Mr. Chairman, is it okay to move to Lauren?
It is perfectly acceptable. After I told her initially, I thought she could introduce herself because I didn't think she was on the schedule to talk. Now I understand she is. So she's already introduced herself, and Lauren, welcome back to Institutions.
Thank you. So I was kind of prepared to give some information on the FY22 appropriation, but Mr. Chairman, you had mentioned FY21, so I can give a quick update on where we're at with what we have spent out of the FY21 appropriation. We started with, I believe it was 6.6 million, and we have spent about half of that. We've got 3.4 million left in the fiscal year 21 appropriation. And then the fiscal year 22 appropriation, which was 7 million, those projects have all been, or those funds have all been assigned out to projects, and the project managers may have started working on those projects yet. They may or may not have started working on them depending on what is required of those projects, if they need a design process first. The type of project, if it gets completed during the summer months, if it's summer construction. So they are in various states of completion, but with FY22, we assigned 67 projects to project managers, totaling 3.3 million. And those are across 42 BGS buildings. And we did that in July. So that was about half of the appropriation. And then in January, we have recently decided to fund an additional 51 projects, totaling another 2.8 million. And that is across 36 buildings. And we're doing it a little different this year. Previously, we have taken all our deferred maintenance, as the commissioner mentioned, which are priority one projects in our buildings, boiler replacements, roof replacements, things like that. And we have taken those, we've got about 15 million or so in deferred maintenance for our buildings. And so we take the highest priority projects every year, the most critical, and those are the ones that we put this annual appropriation towards. Previously, we had taken all of the funding in July and assigned it out over projects. Over the course of the year, there's new things that come in, things that we were planning on doing a few years from now, but failed sooner. Things that came up that we weren't planning on doing. So we always have a little bit of what we call emergency and unplanned projects that are sitting out there. So by splitting it this year over assigning some in July and then assigning the rest in January, we're trying to better accommodate things that are coming in over the summer, over the fall, new projects that have come in. Instead of having them wait until the next July when the next appropriation comes in, we're able to kind of accommodate those unplanned things as they come in a little bit better. Just for an example, we had a little over $600,000 in unplanned projects that we did last calendar year. So I took over major maintenance January 1st last year. So the time that I've been tracking it, that's what we had in those unplanned projects. And those are just things that have failed sooner than we expected, or you know, a couple examples like a fire alarm panel may fail and need to be replaced. And that obviously can't wait until the next year's appropriation. So this gives us a little better ability to account for those things as they're coming in and better plan for them. And just trying to work a little closer with our operations and maintenance staff. They're constantly giving us information about our buildings and new projects that need to be on that deferred maintenance list. Any questions on that?
Is there a way that you keep tabs on how much money is out there and available in the event something either doesn't get done because a decision is made not to do it, so that by the end of the budget cycle, there is a sum of money out there that you're aware of that you have in a back pocket somewhere?
Yes. So in working with our financial services division, they have what that original appropriation is. And then in order for a project manager to move ahead with a project on the major maintenance list that's been funded, they have to come to me and tell me how much money they need. And we subtract it from that amount. So we always know what we've got in our accounts. And it allows us, like you're saying, if something were to come up and we need to shuffle priorities around, we know where we're at.
Okay. Senator Mazza.
You find in the past year, Lauren, that cost of projects are increasing because of the shortage of help and shortage of materials? And because I know that's been a general trend. Everyone that's a project supposed to cost 50,000 is now costing 60 or 70, or is that, have you felt that at all?
Yes. Yes, we have noticed that on a lot of our projects. And we've also noticed that the amount of people that are bidding on our projects has gone down just because they have so much work, or they're concerned that they don't have the staff in order to provide a bid for us.
Yeah, that's affecting us so many industries right now. I talked to, in fact, agency of transportation. It's going to be a big issue with paving and all the other things because there aren't going to be people bidding. And if they do bid, it's going to be a lot higher because unavailable of people to do the job. So it's going to make a big difference, I think, in the years to come. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Lauren, I don't know if you had anything more you wanted to tell us.
I think that's it for today.
Okay. Joe Aja, how'd she do?
I think she did very well. So we'll keep her in that position.
I also had Brian Sewell on for today. I don't know whether, Brian, you wanted to kick anything in.
I will be speaking on behalf of the state energy revolving funds. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me this afternoon. If this is the time, I'm happy to move into that section of the agenda.
Well, let's hang on and just ask, is there anybody else out there that wanted to talk on this particular subject? Seeing no one chomping at the bit, then I'm not sure whether you were planning on having that lead, Brian, but if Commissioner wanted to jump ahead of you, I'm sure she will jump right in and let me know that.
So I'll do another little framing because it's just kind of fun to do that. I enjoy coming to committee and being with you gentlemen here. So we are proud and honored on our state energy management program. And Brian will definitely dive into the details and give greater specifics. But the long and the short of the program is the intention is to do energy efficiency projects in our buildings, mostly state-owned, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also lower the amount of money we're paying, right, on our utility bills. Because the more efficient our buildings can be, the less costly they are. And that includes things like weatherization and installation. It includes things like lighting, could include things like fuel switching. And for a long time, Dan Edson was the program manager. And you've probably seen Dan in this committee before. He left us in September. And Brian had been working for Dan for a couple of years. And I just have to say, before Brian steps up, I always like to embarrass staff because this is the fun part about being a commissioner, is Brian, basically, as soon as Dan left, he hit the ground running and we haven't skipped a beat. And Brian has done an amazing job, not only with the state energy management program, but last year, we also started up an extension of that program to municipalities. And so Brian has almost single-handedly been doing both jobs and trying to implement a brand new program, which can be very challenging because there's a lot involved when you're trying to stand up a new program. So I just want to say that we're proud and we're honored to have Brian, and we're proud and honored to not only have our state energy management program, but also the ability to extend it to municipalities. I will put a plug in this committee for that program. So we have a little bit of seed funding to basically work with towns and do some energy audits so we can identify what is sort of the most cost-effective way to improve the energy efficiency of these buildings. However, what we don't have is we have no appropriation to actually do any projects. The money that we've received is from VLight and the Public Service Department. And so at some point, and last year, the governor did propose $5 million to be put into a revolving fund for municipalities. In House appropriations, it went up to $10 million. And then when it made it to the Senate, they killed it. And so now we don't have any actual funding to do projects with municipalities. There are a number of proposals out there this session to look at this in a lot of different ways. We are eager to see where it goes. But in any case, it would be great if we could continue to progress that program after we get it off the ground.
Senator McCormick.
Thanks. Do you know how is this addressed, or is it addressed in the Budget Adjustment Act?
So it is not addressed in the Budget Adjustment Act. Our request for the 5 million from the governor was last year in the regular budgeting cycle. So it was not proposed for the BA, and there is in your capital bill this year, there is a $44 million request in the 113 million of the special capital bill infrastructure funds coming from the federal government. There is a $44 million proposal to essentially do this work. It would be grants instead of a revolving fund, because I've since learned that if we have a revolving fund and federal money comes back, we actually have to give it back to the federal government. And so the goal here would be 44 $1 million grants to go to community centers throughout the state of Vermont, whether that's a library or a town hall, but basically where people in your towns gather. And that money would be used for energy efficiency. It would be used for resiliency. It would be used for putting in additional infrastructure so that people can do their telehealth calls and different things like that at those community centers. And BGS will be a player in that program, and we are extremely supportive. And that would also help us continue to progress what we're trying to do, which is help municipalities make their buildings more efficient. And so any support from this committee would be greatly appreciated.
Take it you've already made this pitch to the committee on the other side of the building. Actually, the only committee that's in the building at the moment.
We have tried to make our pitch. Secretary Clauser did a very high level broad brush, but my understanding is we will be called back into House Corrections and Institutions to go into greater detail on that proposal.
I understand Secretary Clauser is coming to our committee tomorrow to do another broad brush.
So I guess I'm out in front of my secretary. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to put the plug in while I have the opportunity.
Every chance to plant a seed is a good one. Commissioner, I don't know if you had anything else you wish to say, or you want to.
No, I'd like to yield to Brian, because he can definitely give a lot more details about the program, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate that. It's been an interesting 2 years, and thank you, Chairman Benning, and the rest of the members of the committee for having us this afternoon. As the Commissioner introed, my name is Brian Sewell. I'm working as the Program Coordinator for the State Energy Management Program, also known as SEMP. But I will try and police myself on the alphabet soup of acronyms that comes with this territory. But please catch me if I misstep. As part of that state energy management program, we have 2 revolving loan funds, which we report out on every January 15th. So those funds are the SURF and the SMRF. The SURF is the State Energy Revolving Fund. and the SMRF is the State Resource Management Revolving Fund. It's a wonderful game to try and play. Which one are we talking about? And it can be difficult to keep them straight. So we'll try and make sure that we do that.
Brian, if I could interrupt for a minute, because I should have done this earlier, but the term revolving fund, for the benefit of our listening audience, could you just briefly describe what that means?
Sure. Especially with the mention of grants, it's helpful to clarify the difference. And with revolving funds, part of the benefit is that as we implement energy conservation projects or energy efficiency projects, we have installation of new equipment. An example could be LED lighting. And you have savings that are estimated for that equipment based on the run hours of the building, the type of fixture that's being replaced, and there's an expected lifetime of the equipment. So let's say we have 15 years on that new type of bulb being installed. We can fund the cost of the retrofit or the replacement of that fixture and generate savings through 10 years. So the benefit of the revolving fund is that the loan is out to implement the new measure. You're paying it back for the cost of the measure, which is, say, 10 years. And then for the remaining 5 years, we're benefiting from just the pure savings of that new measure being in place versus the old equipment. And what's nice about revolving funds is then those funds that were paid back are freed up to be reinvested in the next project. So you can take an original seed amount of funding and turn it into more.
Appreciate that. Dick McCormick, I think you're not on mute, and I'm hearing background noise from somebody.
I apologize if it is me. I'm not on mute, and I'll take care of it. Thanks.
I don't know what you had for
I'm not
lunch.
hearing any background noise here, but I'll see.
Well, maybe it was whatever you had for lunch is growling somewhere. Sorry,
I'm just
Brian.
happy it's not my dog. She's been this puppy is a little disruptive when the weather gets too cold and she can't get her walk in the morning. So at least it's not her. With the two funds that we manage through the state energy program, there is a cap of 1.5 million on the SMRF, and that fund is under the control of the BGS commissioner. The other fund, the SURF, is at the ultimate authority of the Office of the Treasurer, and that has a credit facility up to 8 million. So that would be a total of 9.5 million in funding. At the moment, and as seen in the report from this year for January 15th, we have our number of projects that were initiated over the last year, the current up-to-date savings for those two funds. And at the moment, the SMRF fund, which is at the authority of the commissioner, is looking at about an available balance of just over $200,000. And the SURF fund, which is at the authority of the Office of the Treasurer, is sitting at about 5.5 million. So that kind of gives a brief current status for the two funds. I apologize. I don't know if it was Senator Mazza or another member of the committee who mentioned the cost of projects, but obviously we're seeing that impact energy projects as well as the projects that go through major maintenance. In addition, part of the goal of the project implementation through SEMP is we want to try and bundle as many measures together. So it's not fun for building tenants if we're going in every year, every couple of months to try and implement measures along the way. So what we look to do through the SEMP program is bundle as many implementation measures together as we can, go in once and really install as much as we can. And a lot of those benefits include bundling together sort of lower cost, higher payback measures like lighting with some of the heavier upfront cost measures, maybe fuel switching to a new heating system, whether it's a wood burner or switching out pumps and other equipment in the building. So by bundling those together, we can get more done in one go. But obviously the cost of projects, as that changes, it impacts the energy program as well as major maintenance.
Okay. Committee questions? Commissioner, you're muted.
So I just wanted to add, because we've been actually working really closely together over the summer. With Dan leaving, it's given us a good opportunity to take a look at that program and say, is this program being effective as it could be? And so because we want to create a culture of energy efficiency not only on Brian's team in the energy office, but across operations and maintenance and design and construction as well. Because really we all work together to maintain all of these buildings, and we're more powerful and effective when we're working together. And so all that means that we have decided to split, and there's a reason I'm telling you all this. We have decided to split the team. So half of the team is going to be embedded into my planning and property management division. And that's because that's where all the asset management gets done. And that's where we're really strategic about how we're going to spend the limited dollars that we have. And we're very grateful for all the money that we do receive. And then the other half of the team is going to be moving under design and construction. And we're doing that because, again, we want to embed those project managers onto Joe's team to really, again, reinforce that culture of energy efficiency, and also to have that technical expertise embedded right on the team. So we're doing that. And then I have asked Brian to work more closely, and his staff to work more closely with operations and maintenance as well. And so hopefully by doing just what Brian's talking about, let's work together, let's bundle our, let's combine our efforts, let's bundle projects the best way that we can, and let's make our buildings as efficient as we can. And so I just wanted folks to know about that reorganization, and we're really hopeful for that. And the other thing that I wanted to let folks know that is a challenge, you might say, gee, you got a lot of money sitting in that SURF account that the treasurer's office manages. Why is that? Don't you have more projects to do? And the answer is, we have a lot of projects to do. We have a lot of needs when it comes to energy efficiency. And we also want to be a big player in this field, right? In supporting the governor's goals and the legislature's goals, right? To reduce those GHG emissions over time, greenhouse gas emissions over time. And so we want to do our part, right? And so I take that very seriously. One of the challenges with the treasurer's office is that within my time here at BGS, so in the last 5 years, they have basically reduced the amount of time that we can take a loan out with them. So it used to be around 12 to 15 years, and now it's only around 7 years. So the challenge there is that we can't really access that funding as easily as we used to be able to access it, because the payback period is much shorter. So short payback periods work for things like lighting, which have a rapid turnaround, but fuel switching, for example, right, going from, let's say, oil to biomass, that is a much more expensive project, and it takes much longer to pay it back. So unfortunately, two things are happening. To your point, Senator Mazza, things are getting more expensive, right? And the second piece is that we can do those quick, easy wins, and we've done a lot of them in our buildings, and we're going to keep doing them. But we also have some larger, more expensive projects that take longer to pay back. And unfortunately, we cannot access that account through the treasurer's office. Now I am hiring, very excited. We're going to have hopefully a very savvy financial director that's going to be joining BGS. And I'm super pumped about that. And we're going to try to collaborate with the treasurer to see if there are other ways in which we can extend that agreement to have a longer payback period for certain types of projects. And so we're going to work on that. But I just wanted you to know that, why do you have all that money sitting in the account? Because right now most of the projects we have won't meet that 7-year payback period. So it is a challenge for us, and it slows us down on our ability to do energy efficiency projects.
Senator Mazza.
Jennifer, when you're looking at projects, do you determine through our engineers what the cost is going to be, or do you go out in the market and get some estimates? Because there's so many different projects that you deal with. How do you get a figure whether it's going to be 300,000 or 600,000? Do you figure it out first, or you go out and ask to bid on it, or not bid on it, just give you a quote?
That's a great question, Senator Mazza, and it depends which group you're asking, because it works slightly differently in Joe's in design and construction than it does in the energy office. So I'm going to, if it's okay to yield my time to Brian, he can respond on how it works for the energy office.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mazza, for the question. It's a good one. Within the SEMP program, State Energy Management, our process starts with investment grade energy audits. And so we'll go through the building with our hired contracts on retainer. They look at everything from the shell of the building, the lighting. They do a strict count. They'll mark down all of the mechanical systems and equipment being used to heat and cool the building. And then what we do is get a pretty detailed report. And because it's investment grade, we have these contracts that are designed to be measured and verifiable. And that report will give us a list of proposed energy conservation measures, which can include, everything from lighting through switching the heating system, and it has an estimated cost. That obviously will change pretty frequently as we go through the process of turning that report into an actual installed project. But that really gives us our first glimpse at what the expected cost of the project is going to be. And because it's an investment grade level audit, we're pretty confident that we can start there. And so we build out our project application and request for funding based on that investment grade energy audit.
Thank you.
Joe Age, did you want to kick in on that on your angle?
How you estimate projects, Joe, on your team? He loves this question, by the way. You're muted.
Didn't want to provide background noise.
He's taking a nap.
He is taking a nap.
He's kind of
Welcome.
bored.
I wish. No, the estimating has always been difficult. We sometimes are asked early on in the process of how much will this project cost, even down to some of the smaller things that are inside of major maintenance, which can be, as small as $5,000 there. We go with experience. A lot of the times it's by square foot cost for your larger projects. It's also from our consultants. We'll hire consultants who specialize in estimating and or contractor to provide those prices. We also use a national estimating outfit called US Means. And what they do is they scour the US and look for prices from architects and construction firms and try to assemble unit prices and project costs for different types of buildings and products. We put all this together, and this is how we come up with an estimate. Rarely do we hit it right on the nose. We are typically low. We're trying to counter that with going in initially with a 20% contingency. And although it appears high, a lot of the times when I've been here testifying, I've been asked, well, how much would this cost? And I quickly do that square foot cost in my head and throw out a number, and I've forgotten a few things. Or when we get into design, we learn more about the things that we did not consider. It could be that the sewer line that's there now also needs to be replaced. So that's where we come up with our estimates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, committee? I think that concludes the subject matter for which we were all brought together this afternoon. I want to thank you all for coming by, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again as soon as we start locating how much money is in Lauren's back pocket somewhere. We can figure out where we need to get something. But thanks again for coming to join us.
Thank you so much,
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Goodbye.
We are
Thank
going to switch gears. I see Barbara Neal is on the screen. We're going to be talking about 911 compliance grant program. And Barbara, I'm hoping that not only can you talk about the balances, but give us some kind of an update from the last time you were in front of us as to what's going on. Welcome back to Senate Institutions. And by the way, you weren't here when I began, so I'll repeat what you probably heard a year ago. We do have an understanding that there actually is a listening audience out there. And I've been very surprised to see the numbers of people who are out there watching. And I have to assume a lot of them have never been part of these kinds of conversations before and are learning things from scratch. So we try to keep it as low level as we can possibly do in order to let folks know what a given acronym is or some kind of language you may be speaking in. If I interrupt you, it's probably because I'm trying to red flag it and think, let's make sure everybody out there knows what we're talking about. With that, welcome back, and the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you, Mr. Chair, and all the members of the committee. I do have a quick question for you. Would you like me to give a brief overview of the 911 program itself and then go into the compliance grant portion?
Yes, I would. And I'd also like to have you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how you fit into the picture.
I sure will. Okay, great. Thank you. So for the record, I'm Barbara Neal, Executive Director of Vermont's Enhanced 911 Board. And to the overview question, so it's going to sound like I'm going back in time a little ways here, but I'll get us back to the current time pretty quickly. So the Enhanced 911 Board was created in 1994 as the single governmental agency responsible for statewide 911 in Vermont. The 911 Board is an independent state board not currently attached to any other agency or department in state government. We do, however, consult regularly with several, including Department of Public Safety, Public Service Department, Agency of Digital Services, and others. And also we consult and work with stakeholders at the local and county level to meet all of our statutorily defined responsibilities. The 911 Board itself, it consists of 9 members, all appointed by the governor, 1 each representing state, county, and local law enforcement, emergency medical services, fire service, municipalities, and we have 3 members of the public. The board staff includes myself and 9 other full-time staff members and 1 part-time administrative support person. The board staff responsibilities fall into 3 general categories. One is IT management, and that is of the 911 system itself, and our system contractor, who is currently a company called InDigital. Then we have the second broad category is database administration. This team of 4 is responsible for developing and maintaining multiple critical databases that make the NG, Next Generation 911 system work in Vermont. They maintain address information and ensure that the GIS or mapping information is up to date and accurate. And then the third broad category for board staff responsibilities is training and communications. And that is 2 individuals who are responsible for ensuring that all 100 or so of Vermont's 911 call takers are trained and certified, that they're meeting all the continuing education and recertification requirements. This team also has quality control responsibilities and responsibilities related to public education and outreach. And I will touch on this a little bit more later, but the training and communication staff, there are 2 of them, have been significantly impacted in their day-to-day responsibilities of late, since about September, due to critical staffing shortages that are happening at the Department of Public Safety answering points, or PSAPs. That's the 911 call centers. So I will circle back to the work that the training and communications team is doing here in just a minute. Funding, currently, the 911 program is funded through the Vermont Universal Service Fund, which I could take up all our time talking about the difficulties that have existed in the revenues coming into that fund of late. But long story short, they've been insufficient to support our program and the other programs that the VUSF is required to support. So you will see in the FY23 budget request and in a report that was submitted by the Secretary of Administration earlier this month that the recommendation from the administration is we move the 911 program from being funded through the Vermont Universal Service Fund to being funded through the general fund. And that recommendation is reflected in the FY23 budget request, which for our program is just under $4.6 million for FY23. The 911 board, I always like to remind people of this, is responsible for the statewide 911 system, but does not have oversight over dispatch agencies or their operations, and no oversight over emergency response agencies themselves. Some quick statistics from 2021. We handled just under 237,000 calls last year, which was up about 13% from 2020. 75% of our 911 calls are coming from wireless cellular devices. There were about 33,000 abandoned 911 calls, and an abandoned 911 call occurs when a caller hangs up before a 911 call taker has spoken to them, before the call taker has answered the line. And that's significant. That's about 14% of our total call volume, because when an abandoned call happens, the 911 call taker is responsible for calling that number back and ensuring that the person on the other end of that phone does not have an emergency and that everything is okay at that location. It takes about 5 seconds for us to answer a 911 call. We're on the phone for about 2 minutes. And in that 2 minutes, we're assessing the nature and location of the emergency. We're contacting responders, or more precisely, we're contacting the dispatch agencies for those responders. And we're providing pre-arrival instructions to help manage the situation before responders get on scene. And one last statistic for 2021, we had 475 text to 911 messages, which was up a lot from the year before. It was up about 40% from the 340 text messages to 911 we got in the previous year. In August of 2021, a new rule became effective, a new board rule became effective, which requires originating service providers, so telephone service providers, to report to us when their customers have lost service, so and no longer have the ability to call 911. So these are outages that occur in an originating service provider's network and impact the subscribers. There are certain thresholds at play for when they have to report these outages, and I can fill you in on that in more detail if you'd like. But at a high level, I can tell you that since the rule became effective in August, we've received 277 outage reports from wireline, wireless, and Voip service providers combined. Those outages impacted anywhere from 10 to just over 8,000 subscribers for varying durations of time. There were 2 wireless outages since August that impacted over 90,000 subscribers, 2 separate events of 1 to 3 hours each. The wireless carriers were accounted for about 22% of our outage reports. Voip carriers were accounted for 68% of the outage reports, and wireline carriers about 10% of the outage reports. And the durations for all of those events ranged anywhere from 18 minutes to the longest being a 7-day event with a wireless carrier. But that was kind of an outlier, though. Typically, they're not days-long events. So that rule, we are still going through the information that's coming into us to see if we can identify any patterns with that information. But it has certainly been keeping us busy with those outage reports coming in.
Is there a dominant theme in each of those categories that you are looking at for something we need to address and cure?
One of the reasons that the rule was required was conversations at the legislature about the impact of power outages on telephone service. And we are noticing that, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's not an insignificant amount of outages, especially for Voip providers, are related to residential or commercial power outage events. So I think we may need more time to understand specific problems that might be going on, but that's one of the things that we're looking at.
Okay.
Switching now to 911 call taking. So I told you the board staff has three major responsibilities. And one of them is not typically actually taking the 911 calls. So the 911 board partners with 5 law enforcement agencies around the state for 911 call handling services. Those 5 law enforcement agencies operate a total of 6 public safety answering points. You'll hear me refer to those as PSAPs. Those are 911 call centers. Each PSAP is responsible for answering calls from a primary catchment area, a primary geographic area, and for providing backup service to all of the other PSAPs. Department of Public Safety operates 2 of the PSAPs, one at Westminster, one at Williston. And then there are 4 regional PSAPs operated by the St. Albans, Shelburne, and Hartford Police Departments and the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department. Our system design intentionally allows for calls to route among these 5 PSAPs. If there is a no call taker available in the primary PSAP, the call will automatically and seamlessly route to a call taker in one of the other 5 PSAPs. And that happens routinely, especially during events that might generate a high number of calls in a very short period of time. And is also come into play with these staffing shortages as well. So let me talk about that briefly. The Department of Public Safety has historically answered nearly 70% of the 911 call volume in the state. About the middle of last year, maybe a little bit prior to that, middle of last year, it became very clear that their call volume capacity was significantly impacted by the staffing shortages that they were experiencing. So they went from answering nearly 70% of the statewide call volume to answering under 55% of the statewide call volume. And because of the way our system is designed, if a call can't be answered at a primary PSAP, it's going to roll out to another PSAP. And in the case of the Department of Public Safety, the vast majority of those calls go to those 4 regional PSAPs. So as the Department of Public Safety call volume capacity went down, there was a corresponding increase in the call volume at the regional PSAPs. And it was difficult for them to handle the impact of this call volume with their existing 911 equipment, which we provide, and their existing staffing. So what the board did in September was redeploy our 2 training coordinators to 911 call taking responsibilities during certain critical hours of the day. So rather than doing their traditional responsibilities of training and certification and public education and outreach and quality control, they are focused now primarily on 911 call taking during their workday. This has helped provide a layer of insulation between the calls rolling out of the Department of Public Safety and into the regional PSAPs. So these dedicated 911 call takers catch those calls before they get to a regional center. So the 2 training coordinators are doing that. We also have support on the dedicated call taking project from Lamoille County PSAP, who has resources available, not all the time, but some of the time to help support that function. St. Albans PSAP is expecting to become involved in that dedicated function as well here in the coming weeks. And we've initiated conversations with our other 2 regional PSAPs to understand their capacity for handling another 911 workstation in their facility, and then their ability to actually staff that position. So we're continuing those conversations. And I should add, in November, Department of Public Safety did hire 4 temporary part-time individuals who were dedicated to 911 call taking. So that has helped to to help handle these call volume shifts as well. So we're still working with DPS and other partners to make sure we are mitigating the impacts of these significant call volume shifts. We are fortunate that even with all of this going on, our call takers are still answering calls well within the national standard of answering 90% of calls within 10 seconds or less. What we want to do is avoid any negative consequences of long-term staffing shortages. So we're continuing to work to make sure that 911 call takers get the expected level of service. So that brings me to the reason why I'm here today, which is to talk about the 911 compliance grant program. So I'm sure most, if not all of you, remember that the compliance grant program was established back in 2016 as a way to support Vermont public schools in making changes to their telephone systems so that they could meet certain 911 requirements for location. So we had previously had situations where 911 calls from schools would not display the physical location of the school, but rather the supervisory office or some administrative part of the school system. So the goal was to get every school to display its correct physical location with a correct callback number and to specify the location within the building that the caller was calling from when they were using that school's telephone system. When we started this project back in 2016, I should say we restarted it in 2016, only 20% of Vermont public schools were able to send all of the required information. And you will see in the report that I sent over to you, I believe yesterday, that we are now at 88%. So 267 of Vermont's 304 public schools have demonstrated the ability to send the required 911 location information to our system. So it's been a long, slow slog to get the schools into compliance, so to speak, for them to make the changes to make this possible. But we are getting there. By the time we finish up some of the grant program, the grant projects that are in process now, we should be over 90%. We will be over 90% of Vermont schools being compliant with these requirements. And I should stress that's the public schools that we're working with on this project. So as you saw in the report I sent over, we have dispersed about 780,000 of the million or so dollars that had been funding this grant program. We have about $250,000 that are encumbered but not yet dispersed. Those are projects that are still in the works. We expect to have them completed likely by the end of this year. So that leaves just under $40,000, $39,000 and some change that is still in the funds that you provided to that program that we were not able to get out to schools. So we thought we did a pretty good job on that $1 million to get it down to 39,000. So that is where we are now. The program, it was the intent of the legislature to discontinue that grant program at the end of FY21. So we continued to work with the available funds. We still have programs going on, but we haven't requested or received any more funds into that grant program. So once we're done with these projects, we believe we will be finished with this particular project.
What is the holdup at this point with the remaining schools? Is it lack of money or is there pushback in some fashion?
No, there's the schools have been very cooperative in trying to get their systems up to speed and also implementing interim solutions while they while they get the budgetary process going, where they get the funds available to make the changes and so forth. So typically the obstacle is the money. So the grant program has certainly helped with that. Some projects, though, are much more than even the grant can support. So that was a $25,000 matching grant fund, but some projects were significantly more than that. So there's some financial considerations, budgetary considerations that have to be worked through by the schools. I can tell you that, let me get there are 10 schools that are pending a grant project. So they're in the works to complete their projects. 24 schools that are still in the process of identifying how they're going to get this work done. And they've been issued a waiver by the 911 board, which does not, what it does is it allows us to put in interim requirements. So let's say that the telephone system won't automatically deliver the phone number that you're calling from or the room number that you're in. We require those schools in the interim to post that information near the phone so that the caller is able to convey that to the call taker. It's not ideal because one of the concerns is if the caller can't speak, how does that information get through? But it is better than not having any interim requirement in place at all. And I think I skipped over this point, which is important. 100% of Vermont public schools are now sending the correct physical location of their buildings. So, which was a little bit of a hurdle that we had to get over in the beginning. So we're getting the correct address to the front door in 100% of the cases. In 88% of the cases now, we're getting the more granular information about the location within the building. And in the other 12% that we have those interim solutions in place.
Committee, questions? Senator McCormick.
Yeah. This is not specifically on what you've just been talking about, but it is on about your shop. There was a lot of controversy a while back about the dispatchers and changing where the dispatchers were working. And there was some concern that it might actually cause problems. How is that working now?
Well, I think you're referring to is when the Department of Public Safety closed the Derby and Rutland barracks several years ago. And I think really it would be best for Department of Public Safety to speak to that.
Okay.
But I can tell you that I've heard representatives and leadership from Department of Public Safety indicate that those closures have certainly not helped the particular staffing shortages that are going on now. But beyond that, I should let Commissioner Sherling speak to that.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Barb, just for the benefit of our listening audience, I'd like to take us through an example of how this system works. I, for instance, live in the town of Linden, and if I grab my phone and dial 911, where would the location be that the first dispatcher picks up?
So if you're in Lindenville, your 911 call, or Linden, I'm sorry, will be routed to the Williston Public Safety Answering Point. That call taker will determine who you are, where you are, and what is going on, and then will contact the appropriate responders for your location and your event. So, and let me step back, we contact the appropriate dispatch agency for the responders for your event. So that could be, depending on the location, it could be that police, fire, or EMS is dispatched out of the same public safety answering point that answers your call. Or in other cases, they may need to transfer that call to the appropriate dispatch agency. And I'm not remembering the specifics of Linden in particular on where the responders are dispatched from, but that is how it works. You can either have the 911 call and and the responder dispatched at the same location, or there can be two separate locations involved.
And if the dispatchers at Williston are occupied on other calls and the call gets rerouted, is
Yep.
there an automatic rerouting to a given location, or is it random for whoever is available next?
The call will route to the longest idle call taker anywhere in the state. So to be the call taker who has been off the 911 lines the longest.
And is that system threatened by power outages?
The 911 system,
Yes.
no, I mean, the 911 system is contracted to be available to 5 nines availability, so 99.999% availability. So there are redundancies built in, resiliencies built in. Power outages at a public safety answering point, for example, are handled through UPS systems and that type of thing. So I don't want to say that you can never have an event that's power related that would impact us, but the resiliency is built into the system.
So the nearest dispatch to me is in Williston, Chittenden
We'll
County.
take care of you, Joe.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
We got
Well-
a new center going in.
Well, I'm trying to look back when they decided to remove the PSAP in Derby. Do we now have 2020 hindsight to see whether that was a good move or a bad move?
Are you asking me that?
Oh, yes, I'm trying to put you on the spot. Let's put it that way.
I think that it created some challenges that might be becoming maybe more visible right now with the staffing shortages that are happening at Department of Public Safety. I don't know that I could pinpoint specific cause and effect, but I think that very question has been raised and discussed, at the Department of Public Safety and so forth. So yeah, I can't speak to a specific cause and event, but I don't think that it is helping the current situation.
Okay.
One thing I thought maybe I should clarify too, you said that the closest dispatch center to you is Williston. So actually, there are 6 public safety answering points in Vermont that answer 911 calls and also perform dispatch functions. But in addition to that, there are close to 45 or 50 dispatch centers all around the state that are responsible only for dispatching, not for answering 911 calls directly from the public. So in the case of Linden, I suspect some of your responders may be dispatched out of St. Johnsbury, for example, St. Johnsbury Police Department. So a 911 call taker in Williston would transfer that call to the St. Johnsbury Dispatch Center, who would then in turn be in touch, do the dispatching work with the responders for your area.
And the screen that a 911 taker is looking at when a call comes in, does that contain a map of Vermont, or is there some kind of a list of towns that this call would be routed to immediately?
So yes, so there is a map associated with the 911 call taking equipment that displays the responder for any of the 3 responders, police, fire, and EMS, for every location in the state. So no matter where you click on the map, you can see who the responders are for that specific location, whether it's in your driveway or in the woods 2 miles from your house. If we can pinpoint the caller's location, the appropriate responders are immediately available to the call taker on that map. And then it's just the push of a button to connect by telephone to those responders.
Okay. Committee, any other questions? Barb, thank you very much for coming by. I don't know where the the House is going to end up on any of this conversation, but should there be something done that you are concerned about after the bill comes over to us, this is the capital bill we're talking about now,
Sure.
feel free to reach out and we'll see if we can't get you back in.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to see you all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Bye-bye.
We're going to shift gears committee to the Department of Environmental Conservation. We also got a report from the Vermont Environmental Protection Agency Pollution Control Revolving Fund and the annual report on unspent capital funds for fiscal year 2021 and older. Peter Walk, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation, is with us here. I'm looking around. Yes, he is. Eric Blatt is also here, as is Pedrick Monks. I don't know which of the three of you would care to lead off, but Commissioner, I'm going to drop it in your lap if I don't see anybody else chomping at the bit to be the first one to talk with us this afternoon. None of the three of you were present earlier when I give my little spiel about we're now on YouTube, which means we have an audience, an unknown audience, but we actually do have an audience, which is very surprising to me when I first realized this. And sometimes it's a lot of people who may come from various backgrounds, but I have to assume for the default purposes that many people do not know the language that we are about to speak. And I try to keep the conversation at a level where virtually anybody can understand what's happening here. So if you and I are talking about something and you go into some vernacular that we're familiar with, if it's red flag for me that somebody out there in YouTube land doesn't understand what we're talking about, I may interrupt you and ask you to explain X, Y, or Z. As always, you've all been here or at various committees before. I ask you to introduce yourself first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fit into the government process, and then launch right into the substance of whatever you chose to talk about this afternoon. Commissioner, I think the ball is first in your court. Welcome to Senate Institutions. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that introduction, and I've always appreciated the way you approach this Zoom-based committee work. It's important to remember who the audience is and how important that is for folks to understand, especially in the Capitol Bill world that gets very wonky and very vernacular based very quickly. For the record, my name is Peter Walk. I am the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. As you mentioned, I'm joined by Eric Blatt and Pedrick Monks today. They will do the bulk of the talking. I just wanted to be here to show the support for them and to help ground you in the work that we do with the Capitol Bill. It kind of primarily falls into, I would say, three areas, and the others can correct me as we go on. But the bulk of that work is the state match. So the state proportion of the funding that we're required to match for EPA dollars that come in to help support sewer programs, drinking water programs, et cetera, wastewater treatment facilities in communities, the work that we do, the loans and other services that we provide to those facilities. That provides, the Capitol Bill often provides the state component. We're required to provide 20% match to that. So that's a bunch of what Patrick now works on. Many of you may recognize him from his stormwater days. He has taken on a new role with the department, and we're excited that he is now in charge of those programs, the state revolving fund programs, those loan programs that support our communities. And then we have a bunch of other clean water work that is capital funded, less and less so these days as part of the clean water fund process. And then we do a bunch of dam safety work, and that will become increasingly more important as we get into some significant work we're doing at the Waterbury Dam over the next few years in partnership with the Army Corps, where we are again providing state match to a federal project. Otherwise, if we were to have to take it on ourselves, it would be outside of our capacity. So with that, I will hand it over to Eric and Pedrick. I just wanted to take that opportunity to say thank you for your continued support of the work that we do, which is really mostly passed on to the communities around the state who benefit from that work. So
Well, I appreciate that introduction, Commissioner, and I just want to say for the benefit of my committee, when the Commissioner was talking about dam safety work, he was talking about DAM and not DAMN.
I would
Trying to
never
get
be,
humor and get
never
them
be so
laughing.
bold.
I thank you
Yes.
very much for that introduction. Eric, has the baton been handed off to you?
Yes, okay, and good afternoon, Chair. Yes, for the record, my name is Eric Blatt. I'm Director of Engineering in the Water Investment Division. Here to talk about the two legislative reports that we're responsible for submitting to the legislature on an annual basis. The first is the pollution control report, and the second one is the capital funds that are FY21 and older, the status of the unspent capital funds to date. And I will turn it over to Patrick. He can introduce himself.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Monks. I'm the program manager of the Water Infrastructure Finance Program. We're part of the Water Investment Division. I work with Eric. As Peter mentioned, I'm fairly new to my role. So I think today I'll be doing more listening than talking as Eric walks us through the two reports.
Patrick, is this your first time in front of institutions?
I'm not sure if I came to institutions as part of stormwater, it was a while ago. I think I have been in though.
Well, welcome to institutions.
Thank you.
Eric, take us away.
Okay. So I have a copy of the report. I don't know if you want to put the report on the screen. I'll walk you through it.
Alex, are we able to do that?
We are able, and
Otherwise,
I also made Eric a co-host if he'd like to screen share and walk us through it as well, if that's easier.
Okay, let me try it. Let me try to do that.
If you're successful, Eric, you're one
Here,
step
yep,
and a half
yep.
ahead of me.
Okay, I'm going to give it a shot. Let me know if sharing my screen.
And committee, just as a reminder, if we go to screen share, I cannot see the committee. If you have a question, just holler something out.
Is this showing up on your screen yet or no?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Which is the first report you want to talk about? I can pull that up.
The pollution abatement report. Well, we can get going. Maybe you can pull it up and I can walk through it while you bring it up. Try it one last time.
It's
Is that
working.
showing up yet?
Yep, it is.
Is it showing up now? Great. Okay. So this is a report on a revolving fund that's used for clean water projects. It's mostly municipal projects, but it does include some private projects. In 2018, we expanded the eligibility of the program through legislation. And I'm going to scroll down to the discussion section. So it was Act 185 of 2018 that expanded on the eligibility, the Clean Water SRF. These eligibilities existed prior to that at the federal level, but the state had not yet adopted sort of the full expansion of eligibilities until 2018. So I'm going to scroll back up just to give you a little bit more context for these funds. So on an annual basis, we receive a federal grant from EPA that's used to capitalize this fund. And those funds are matched with state funds, and typically they are derived from capital funds at a rate of 20%. So the last federal cap grant that went into the fund was just under 8 million, and that translates into just under 1.6 million in match. Along with the annual capitalization of the fund with federal grant and state match is the repayment of previous year's loans that have been awarded and have gone into repayment. And in addition to that is any interest that's earned on the fund itself. So in this report, we're compelled to identify what was funded during the previous fiscal year, in this case, 2021, what we funded up to this point in state fiscal year 22. And this report is picking up all the loan awards through December 15th of 2021. And then also indicate what we anticipate funding throughout the rest of the year. And then lastly, to just give the committee an idea of the kinds of projects that get funded, can be funded out of this particular fund. So a couple of takeaways. In FY21, we awarded a total of 40 loans for just under 28 million. And as you'll see here, most of those loans went to municipalities, 35 municipalities and 5 privately owned systems or entities. In 22, we have so far awarded 23 loans for just under 10 million. And again, the majority of those were municipal entities. We had 1 private so far within that group. When we get into the table, you'll see we have a number of loans still pending. The total need for those loans is 55.6 million, or I'm sorry, 70.5 million, and we have roughly 55.6 million still available to award. So based on that, the pending need actually outstrips the monies that are available currently. However, a number of those projects probably either won't proceed or will have received other funds, namely ARPA in some of these instances. And I'm going to scroll down to the pending list. So is everybody still with me? Are you all seeing table 3?
We are. Your challenge, Eric, was to end up on a spot where all of us on the committee had 1 location in your list.
Okay.
I don't think you got there.
Oh.
That's okay.
Well, if we're all seeing the same thing, we should be looking at table 3 in the report.
Yes. First town is Montgomery.
Excellent. Okay, so in Montgomery is a great example of what I just mentioned. They're on the priority list, which is all these projects are on our current adopted priority list, which we adopted early last summer, late spring, early summer. And Montgomery applied to get on the list, and so they're on the list at 10.6 million. In the interim, they have found other financing for their project, which includes ARPA dollars. So this is an example of where at the time they were on the list, we had reserved essentially or loan dollars for the project, but in the end, they may or may not need any of those loan dollars. And there are other projects in a similar category. As we go down the list, Virgins has projects that potentially will receive ARPA dollars, and so they may not need full amount of the loan that's shown on the list. The bottom line is,
I'm curious, Eric, as to why Derby Line would be apparently in some involvement with Stansted, Quebec.
Okay.
What's that all about?
Okay, so Stansted is the community that actually owns the wastewater treatment plant. Derby Line is served by Stansted, and they have split the cost. What you see there, the 2.3 million, that is Stansted, I'm sorry, that's Derby Line's share of the overall project. And the project is occurring in Canada. So the work that's being done is not in Derby line, but that is their proportionate share of the overall cost, the improvements that had to be made to the treatment plant in Canada.
So we have an international arrangement for waste disposal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and
Interesting.
mhm. And this actually goes back to 1980. I think that's when the first agreement was developed, and that was back during the federal construction grant era. And that was the initial funding of this project where Derby line was serviced by Stansted. And at this point, this is 1980, we're over 40 years since the plant has been in dire need of upgrade. That's what's happening.
Okay.
Then so that's the 70.5 million roughly represents the total pending need, of which some will likely be filled through other sources of money, as well as some of these projects probably won't proceed within federal fiscal year 22. I mean, invariably we have projects that even though they get on the priority list, for one reason or another, they're just not able to proceed during the fiscal year that they've been on the adopted list for. But that doesn't preclude them from coming back to the fund and reapplying for the next year's priority list. So the last table is just gives an idea of the kinds of projects that we can fund out of this revolving loan fund. And towards the bottom, the last two in particular are sort of the newer eligible activities that could be funded as a result of the legislation in 2018. So I'll minimize this and unshare.
While you're doing that, Eric, I have a question about that. The last couple of itemized notations. We have a covered bridge here in the town of Linden that was in the process of collapsing. And in the event that it did collapse, we did manage to rescue it, at least temporarily. And I understand, about to have some grant money coming into town to repair it. But in that kind of a situation, would that fall within the natural resources category that would become eligible for this kind of a fund if in fact the bridge was to fall into the river and stream alterations were threatening?
That is a great question. I don't know offhand whether that would. I mean, at the very least, there has to be a water quality benefit to the project. That's sort of a bare minimum requirement. The project you're describing is really on the margins of what potentially would be eligible. But I will say dam removals are eligible if there's a demonstrated water quality benefit. So this is sort of getting into kind of like that area of eligibility. But this is the first time I've run into this, a question of this sort for eligibility. So
okay. Well, it was just a thought. We were in real trouble there for a while with the bridge about to collapse. Managed to get some volunteer work to shore it up, and now you just may have heard on the Channel 3 news within the past 48 hours, they're talking about grant money coming to Linden to actually shore it up for good. But that was an emergency situation that we were looking for emergency funding on. I just want to get the idea of what the parameters are for approaching this fund.
Well, one thing I'll say about these funds, I mean, we do have projects that qualify as emergency projects, and really what that means in terms of the revolving fund program is that project goes to the top of the list. So essentially they're pretty much guaranteed of funding, but the time element doesn't really change. They still have to meet all of the requirements that any other revolving fund project would need to meet. And And so it's somewhat of a misnomer in terms of thinking of it as monies immediately going out to deal with an acute situation. The monies are pretty much guaranteed, but they won't necessarily go out in the timeframes that a community would need to address
Yeah.
sort of an acute problem.
Fair enough.
But the financial gain, I guess, for the community under those circumstances is they could short-term borrow, and then their long-term debt would potentially be much lower cost debt through the state revolving fund.
Yep.
And then these funds are put out at market and below market rates. So they are a form of lower cost financing for municipalities.
Do you
So
have
I
anything else you wanted to tell
want to
us?
switch to the other. No, I think that's good for this report, unless there's some questions.
Committee, any questions on this particular report? Not seeing anybody chomping at the bit. Feel free to carry on.
Okay. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the unspent capital funds report. Great. So perhaps the place to start is to go right to the table.
Now, are you controlling that, Eric, or is Alex controlling that?
No, I'm not. And maybe, can we switch control and then I can scroll as I talk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
I just wanted to make sure I was complimenting the right person for being able to get that up on the screen so quick.
So let's see. Now the question is how, before I had no problems scrolling up and down, so.
You've lost the screen share, I can see.
Yeah, so maybe that's it.
I was actually also doing the screen share for the other document.
Okay. Oh, okay. Let's see. Wrong one has come up. Okay, great. Well, all right. We'll start with the takeaways and then we'll come back to the report, to the actual table. So the table is based on unspent capital funds that are state fiscal year 21 and older through the end of calendar year 2021. So the current unexpended balance of those funds, and I think there are 13 department IDs or accounts, and they total 7.28 million. Of that, we have committed 4.88 million through December 31st. So we still have about 2.4 million pending dollars to actually obligate to projects. So see if this can all fit on, if the print is big enough. So I don't see, we are missing a table. This table is a listing of the ecosystem restoration projects. And this shows the individual grants that have been awarded and the date that these various grants expire. And the dollars that show up here are the amounts that have been awarded and haven't yet been spent. You can see the total by account. We also refer to them as DEPT IDs. The number on the left-hand side, the first set of numbers indicates what department. The 6140 is DEC, the 99 indicates capital funds, and then the next four numbers inform the reader as to what fiscal year those funds were appropriated. So the number 17 indicates that it was fiscal year $18. And the next grouping indicates FY $19, as well as the last grouping. I will say this report is actually missing a key summary. And I wonder if I can just email it right now to the committee.
Well, Eric's doing that, Senator. Obviously, we can update the actual report itself too and make sure that that's
Yeah.
attached so that the legislative reports folks have that for the kind of the record keeping.
Yep. Appreciate that.
Right. So I'm going to do that right now. Reports.
Eric, do you want me to share that missing table at the moment?
Yeah, surprised that is not there.
Alex would need to grant me the ability at the moment.
Yeah, I've just made you a co-host.
Okay, I just pulled it up. I don't know. Let's see if I
You
can
want to
share
open it, Eric, or do you want me to?
I have just opened it. Let me give it a shot, trying to share this again. Okay, is this visible to the committee? It's a
Yes.
table with yellow highlighted row at the top.
Yes.
Great, okay. On the left-hand side are the various accounts, appropriations. And I think there's a total of 13 here. You'll see in column B, that's the session year. And then the act number, the appropriation section goes with those acts. And then the DEPT IDs that you saw on the other sheet for 3 of these appropriations. As of December 31st, column F shows the unexpended balances for each of those accounts. The next column shows how much has been obligated, and then the remaining amount to obligate, and that's that roughly $2.4 million figure at the bottom in row 21. And then we've projected out roughly when these funds will be spent over the next 2 years. Bottom line with this is we pretty much, all of these funds are accounted for. The last column, which is, let's see how I can shift this. The last column on the right gives a very brief description of how these monies are intended to be used. Now that kind of supplements the list that we had up a moment ago that showed the ecosystem restoration projects. Because there's so many of those, we decided that deserves its own spreadsheet. So that's the purpose for that other table. There's also a note, there's one particular appropriation that's a little bit different from the others in terms of the flow of the funds. And that is this appropriation, which is the second to the bottom, this 524,000. Does everybody see that figure? I've just highlighted the cell. This is row 18.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so that's money for grants for public water systems to address Pfas contamination. Even though you see a 0 here for obligated and unspent, In fact, a number of these projects have already moved ahead. We've already awarded dollars to the projects. However, we have to use a separate account to pay for those costs, and then at the end of the fiscal year, get reimbursed from these capital funds. So the columns that show the anticipated expenditure of the funds pretty much indicates we're going to spend all of that money through the end of by the end of the fiscal year 23. This is a case where even though monies are obligated, if you compare these records to finance and management, they would show zero obligated out of this remaining amount of 524,000. That's why I'm just making a note of how these funds are handled a little bit differently than the rest. And right now there are 6 public water systems receiving these funds. And there will be additional public water systems that will be receiving funds to address PFAS contamination. There was a second round of appropriation for this purpose. It's not captured in this report because it's state fiscal year 22 dollars. And so we would be reporting on those dollars a year from now. Are there any questions on these various appropriations? And I've scrolled over to the left, so column A at least provides the description of what each one of these appropriations is for.
I don't hear anybody yelling for a question, Eric.
Okay. We'll revise the report to make sure that this most critical table is in the report.
Eric, Renita is standing by to revise the report and get it back up to the legislature whenever you have that to her. But Senator, thank you for having us in. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Obviously, we run a lot of the capital bill through the department and do some important work with it, and appreciate your continued support, and happy to come in and answer specific questions you may have in the future.
I appreciate that. If we could take the screen share down, Eric.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Committee, any final questions? I am assuming, Commissioner, that you are in the midst of conversations with our counterparts in the House Corrections and Institutions Committee. And as the capital bill and its various components wind their way through that committee, there may be changes. Obviously, if there are changes that are made that concern you, by all means, shout out and come on back. We'll have another conversation about what we're all looking at. But for the afternoon, I appreciate you all coming by.
Thank you, Senator. We will indeed do that. At this point, they are working on other things, and they'll get to us when they're ready for us. But well, I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
All right.
Thank you, Alex, for your help. So long.
Committee, Alex, you can take us off of YouTube because we're done discussing our business today.